Hey everyone, welcome back to Security Unscripted. Today, kind of talking about some AI safety and security. We kind of had a previous conversation with Florencio about AI security and safety, but that's just kind of scratching the surface. So today I have my good friend Huzaifa to come on to talk about AI security and safety from maybe a different lens and maybe a little bit more focused. We're actually going to focus a little bit more on the safety perspective, but kind of draw some correlations around security. So, Huzaifa, welcome to Security Unscripted. And if you could just, for the audience, introduce yourself just briefly, we'll just jump into it.
Thank you, Vincent. As Vincent mentioned, my name is Huzaifa Sidhpurwala. I have been working with open source security for around 20-ish years now. I currently work as a senior principal product security engineer in Red Hat's product security team. And for some time, I have been mainly working on AI safety, security, and trustworthiness.
Awesome. Thanks, Huzaifa. Okay, let's just jump into it. So for security issues, you and I have both been in this space for a really long time, so we kind of understand. There is a really nice way of categorizing security issues in terms of being able to differentiate one security issue from another. I remember back when I started over 20 years ago, if you were referring to a buffer overflow in SendMail, one would ask, which buffer overflow are you referring to? We had security bug IDs. There are a number of different ways that different people tried to solve this problem. And then the common vulnerabilities and exposures showed up, and we were able to have a single name per vulnerability. So instead of saying, here's a SendMail vulnerability, with a buffer overflow, have you fixed it? We could say, have you fixed CV 1999, 1234, whatever it is. When it comes to AI safety issues, right? A similar naming convention like CVE for safety probably makes sense. So that when you're asking somebody about a safety issue in a particular model, you have to consider things like which version, which model in the first place. And I could see, maybe not today, but in the future, that confusion showing up with respect to, well, which safety issue are you talking about? So when it comes to models, and I know that you've worked on a white paper with a few other folks, and I know that you've kind of touched on this. So what does a kind of a CVE equivalence for safety models look like from your perspective?
So first thing which I think we have established, and which the industry also has established, is the fact that though AI safety and AI security are interrelated with each other, they are not essentially the same entities. I mean, they are totally different, and that is why they need to be handled in a different way, right? The second thing which I think you rightly mentioned, that years of experience in security industry has taught us that there needs to be some way to properly track a particular safety issue, similar to the way in which we are tracking security issues right now via the CVE program.
Right.
Now, one would essentially think that the way we track security issues right now, like, when somebody finds a security issue, they approach the CVE program, they assign a number to it, which consists of the year in which the issue was found and a particular serial number after that. So why isn't it convenient, or why isn't it possible to just extend this to safety issues? I mean, it's really easy, right? I mean, if you don't want any frills, or if you want to do it fast without any issues, I mean, that's one very easy way of doing it. But yeah. I think the biggest blocker over here is that safety is not a different kind of security. So one would extend the CVE program if safety was very similar to security, which it is not. Right. So there are 2 or 3 things which you need to understand over here. The first one is safety has got many aspects to it. Like, there is a taxonomy which is widely used in the AI industry, which is known as the ML Commons safety taxonomy, and there are other taxonomies also which are really widely used. What the taxonomy basically says is that there are many aspects to safety issues. So for example, there is maybe a bias, or maybe there is gender bias, or there's bias to a particular category of people in the society. There's bias to using particular words or stuff like that. So safety is very, very complicated as compared with security. Again, if you compare that to security, a security issue, for example, the SendMail buffer overflow issue which you just said, which you just mentioned some time back. It is black and white, which basically means that either it's a buffer overflow or it is not a buffer overflow.
Well, okay. Well, hang on. Not quite so black and white, because it also depends in the send-mail context, anyways, of how you compile it, right? So I mean, there's nuances there, but I think what you're kind of getting at makes a lot of sense. Like, security and safety are similar, but distinct enough that they warrant their own way of tracking. But safety issues could be severe enough, depending on who you are. Maybe something that's unsafe for me isn't unsafe for you, and vice versa. But this is where, like, having that information exposed and available to consumers of these models make a lot of sense. And then I wonder, when you're thinking about the models themselves and how many we're getting, like just the number of models have exploded, and they're not just all large models, large language models. We have smaller models now as well, more discrete. I can see that we can get to that spot of confusion that CVE solved for us over 20 years ago. And so rather than waiting for that spot for the confusion to rear its ugly head, we should have a way of cataloging these sorts of things for safety early, which is, I think, what you kind of advocated for as well. So I know that in the white paper, you kind of were talking about model cards. Now, I'm not a huge AI guy, so I don't understand model cards very well. But say I'm an average Joe. I'm excited to use AI, because who isn't? And I want to be able to use this. But how do I surface that sort of information? Is the model card maybe an appropriate place for that information to live? And then how do I, as a consumer, avail myself of that information so that I can make smart decisions for myself?
Right. First, we need to understand what the model card is, right, and how the model card came into being. So model card essentially is a page or multiple pages of information which contains information about the architecture of the model, what the model has been trained on, probably from where the training data was obtained, like the provenance of the data. And right now, a lot of these frontier models, they contain pages and pages of benchmarking information. Like, we have run this benchmark, and, as compared to this model, this is how we fare. Like, we are better than the other model.
And these are safety benchmarks that you're referring to?
They are. A lot of these benchmarks are not safety at all, because a lot of these benchmarks are performance benchmarks, or intelligence benchmarks, or how these benchmarks are better at solving a mathematical problem or a logical reasoning problem, or solving a university paper and stuff like that. So right. that's what the model cards are made up of right now.
Okay, so performance being like, is my model an idiot, or is my model like really, really smart?
As compared to other models in the market. I mean, if tomorrow, if I need to make a new model, and if I want to sell the model, people normally compare your model with all the existing models which currently exist in the market, and they want to be able to figure out how good or how bad your model is as compared with other models. And benchmarks is one way of doing it. Gotcha. Right now, the model card contains pages and pages of benchmarks, right? One thing which is essentially missing from a lot of these model cards is what kind of safety benchmarking was done, or what kind of safety testing was done on the model, and what is the output. Is the model safe? Is the model safe as compared to other models? What do you mean by this particular safety thing? Like if there is a bias safety benchmark, is there a way to prove that this model is not biased towards particular people in this society, or a particular country, or a particular caste or religion or stuff like that? So I think that is essentially missing from a lot of these model cards right now.
So is there a way, because I know that there's a number of open source foundations and work groups and things like that around AI, is a model card the place for that kind of information, and are there efforts ongoing to maybe expose that information or have some consistency, so it's like I don't have to guess about some safety metrics around this particular model? I can look at, like, here's my shopping list of different models that I'm interested in, and I can compare those safety issues across. Like, are we working on that? Because, and sorry, just one other thing. When you're talking about like all of these benchmarks, bias information, all of this stuff that's in the model card, I imagine there's a stark difference between models purporting to be open and those that are not, because maybe some of the training data isn't exposed in a proprietary model versus, say, an open source or an open AI model. And so kind of is that something that we're looking at standardizing or making consistent, and is the model card the right place for that to be?
Well, I think there are two things which you need to understand over here. One thing which I want to talk about is what we have proposed in the white paper which we wrote. Mm-hmm. The white paper basically proposes that we include safety information. The first thing is we include safety information in the model card. Okay. The reason why we want to do that is model card is the document which is essentially used by people who consume the model and people who work with the models. So this is the best way to kind of send the information to the people who are actually planning to use the model. This is the first thing. The second thing we propose is to add a few things to the model card. One thing which we propose is the intent of the model and the scope of the model. What this basically means is that if I'm creating a model which the creator of the model basically says that we have run a lot of safety benchmarks and our model is safe, and you can use this model as a chatbot or whatever you want to use the model for. Mm-hmm. This is the scope of the model, and the intent of the model is to say that our model is basically safe. So these are the two fields which we propose to be added to the model. And how it basically helps is when a consumer, the person who is trying to use the model, he looks at the intent and the scope of the model to make a decision whether he really wants to use the model in his application. And he knows that the application needs to be safe, and there needs to be no unsafe output from the application. Okay. It also helps us in the whole safety tracking thing which we spoke earlier, right? I mean, if somebody says that your model is not safe, or your model, the output from the model is racist, or the output from the model is unjust to a particular segment in the society, I can always point them to the scope and the intent of the model. And the model card, it basically says in the model card that my model is not trained on any safety data. My model does not know whether the output information is biased or not. So there are two ways in which the scope and the intent is useful. Number one is it makes the consumers make the right decision whether they want to use this particular model in their applications or not. Second thing is when a safety issue is found in the particular model, whether the safety issue should actually be reported to the vendor, whether the safety issue will actually be fixed, will depend on what the intent and the scope of the model is. So if the model provider basically says, don't use my model because we have not trained it on any safety issues at all, then you immediately know that there is no use of reporting the safety issue to the model maker, because the model maker doesn't basically care. It also means that you as a consumer maybe should not be using the model because its output can be unsafe, and that can be a problem for your application.
Right. No, that makes a ton of sense. The picture that came to mind is using an air fryer to warm your office. I mean, its scope and intent is to cook food, not to warm. It's not a space heater. Right. So yeah. I think that having that kind of information up front for people to understand helps them make better choices. And ultimately, this is about consumer choice, and not hopefully limit the amount of surprises they might get as they're starting to use or roll out these models. Definitely appreciate the time, Huzaifa. I know we're a little bit over kind of what we wanted, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about safety kind of like how we expose this information for people to use. So thank you for your time, and for everyone else, thank you for watching Security Unscripted, and we'll see you next time.